Okay, I say. My voice sounds strange in the empty, thin air of this autumn world. We pick our way down the old main street. Raven walks easily, avoiding the torn-up bits of concrete and the twisted metal litter almost instinctively, the way that Sarah did. At the entrance to the old bank vault, where the boys sleep, Bram is waiting for us. Bram has dark hair and mocha-colored skin. He's one of the quieter boys, one of the few who doesn't scare me. He and Hunter are always together. In Zombieland, we would have called them unnaturals, but here their relationship seems normal, effortless. Seeing them reminds me of pictures of Hannah and me, one dark, one light. Raven passes him several buckets wordlessly, and he falls in next to us in silence. But he smiles at me, and I'm grateful for it. Even though the air is cold, soon I'm sweating and my heart pushes painfully against my ribs. It has been more than a month since I've walked more than 60 feet at a time. My muscles are weak, and carrying even the empty buckets makes my shoulders ache after a few minutes. I keep shifting the handles in my palms. I refuse to complain or ask Raven to help, even though she must see that I'm having trouble keeping up. I don't even want to think about how long and slow the way back will be, once the buckets are full. We've left the homestead and the old main street behind, and veered off into the trees. All around us, the leaves are different shades of gold, orange, red, and brown. It is as though the whole forest is burning, a beautiful slow smolder. I can feel the space all around me, unbounded and unwalled, bright open air. Animals move, unseen, to our left and right, rustling through the dry leaves. Almost there, Raven calls back. You're doing good, Lena. Thanks, I puff out. Sweat is dripping into my eyes, and I can't believe I was ever cold. I don't even bother to elbow or swat the stray branches out of my way. As Bram pushes through them ahead of me, they rebound and thwack me hard on my arms and legs, leaving tiny stinging lashes all over my skin. I'm too tired to care. I feel as though we've been walking for hours, but that's impossible. Sarah said the river was a little over a mile away. Besides, the sun has only just risen. A little bit farther and we hear it, over the twittering of the birds and the rush of the wind in the trees, the low, babbling sound of moving water. Then the trees break apart, and the ground turns rocky, and we're standing at the edge of a wide, flat stream. Sunlight glints off the water, giving the impression of coins laid underneath its surface. 50 feet to our left is a miniature waterfall, where the stream comes churning over a series of small, black, lichen-spotted rocks. All of a sudden I have to fight the desire to cry. This place has always existed, while cities were bombed and fell into ruins, while walls went up. The stream was here, running over the rocks, full of its own secret laughter. We are such small, stupid things. For most of my life I thought of nature as the stupid thing, blind, animal, destructive. We, the humans, were clean and smart and in control. We had wrestled the rest of the world into submission, battered it down, pinned it to a glass slide and the pages of the book of SHHH. Raven and Bram are already wading into the stream, holding their buckets, crouching to fill them. Come on, Raven says shortly. The others will be waking up. They have both come barefoot. I crouch down to untie my shoes. My fingers are swollen from the cold, even though I can no longer feel it. Heat drums through my body. I have a hard time with the laces, and by the time I edge close to the water, Raven and Bram have their buckets full, lined up on the bank. Pieces of grass and dead insects swirl over their surface. We will pick them out later, and boil the water to sterilize it. My first step into the stream nearly takes me off my feet. Even this close to the bank, the current is much stronger than it looks. I pinwheel my arms wildly, trying to stay upright, and drop one of the buckets. Bram, who is waiting on the bank, starts to laugh. His laugh is high and surprisingly sweet. All right. Raven gives him a push. That's enough of a show. We'll see you at the homestead. He touches 2 fingers obediently to his temple. See you later, Lena, he says, and I realize it's the first time somebody other than Raven, Sarah, or Hunter has spoken to me in a week. See you, I say. The stream bed is coated in tiny pebbles, slick and hard on the underside of my feet. I retrieve the fall and bucket and crouch low, as Raven and Bram did, letting it fill. Lugging it back to the bank is harder. My arms are weak, and the metal handles dig painfully into my palms. One more to go, Raven says. She is watching me, arms crossed. The next one is slightly larger than the first, and more difficult to maneuver once it's full. I have to carry it with both hands, half bent over, letting the bucket bang against my shins. I wade out of the stream and set it down with a sigh of relief. I have no idea how I'll make it back to the homestead carrying both buckets at once. It's impossible. It will take me hours. Ready to go? Raven asks. Just give me a second, I say, resting my hands on my knees. My arms are already trembling a little. I want to stay here for as long as possible, with the sun breaking through the trees, and the stream speaking its own, old language, and the birds zipping back and forth, dark shadows. Alex would love it here, I think without meaning to. I've been trying so hard not to think his name, not to even breathe the idea of him. On the far side of the bank there is a small bird with ink blue feathers, preening at the edge of the water, and suddenly I have never wanted anything more than to strip down and swim, wash off all the layers of dirt and sweat and grime that I have not been able to scrub away at the homestead. Will you turn around? I ask Raven. She rolls her eyes, looking amused, but she does. I wiggle out of my pants and underwear, strip off my tank top and drop it on the grass. Wading back into the water is equal parts pain and pleasure, a cutting cold, a pure feeling that drives through my whole body. As I move toward the center of the stream, the stones underneath my feet get larger and flatter, and the current pushes at my legs more strongly. Even though the stream isn't very wide, just beyond the miniature waterfall there's a dark space where the stream bed bottoms out, a natural swimming hole. I stand shivering with the water rushing around my knees, and at the last second can't quite bring myself to do it. It's so cold, the water looks so dark and black and deep. I won't wait for you forever, Raven calls out, with her back to me. 5 minutes, I call, and I spread my arms and dive forward into the deepness of the water. I am slammed. The cold is a wall, frigid and impenetrable, and tears at every nerve in my body. There's a ringing in my ears, and a rushing all around me. The breath goes out of me and I come up gasping, breaking the surface, as above me the sun rises higher and the sky deepens, becomes solid, to hold it. And just as suddenly the cold is gone. I put my head under again, treading water, and let the stream push and pull at me. With my head under water I can almost understand its accents, the babbling, gurgling sound. With my head under water I hear it say the name I've tried so hard not to think, Alex, 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 and hear it, too, carrying the name away. I come out of the stream shivering and laughing, and dress with my teeth chattering, my fingernails edged with blue. I've never heard you laugh before, Raven says, after I've pulled on my clothes. She's right. I haven't laughed since coming to the wilds. It feels stupidly good. Ready? Ready, I say. That first day, I have to carry one bucket at a time, lugging with both hands, sloshing water as I go, sweating and cursing. A slow shuffle, set one bucket. Down, go back and get the other bucket. Forward a few feet. Then pause, rest, panting. Raven goes ahead of me. Every so often she stops, puts down her buckets, and strips willow bark from the trees, scattering it across the path so that I can find my way, even after I've lost sight of her. She comes back after half an hour, bringing a metal cup full of water, sanitized, for me to drink, and a small cotton cloth filled with almonds and dried raisins for me to eat. The sun is high and bright now, light cutting like blades between the trees. Raven stays with me, although she never offers to help and I don't ask her to. She watches impassively, arms crossed, as I make my slow, agonizing way through the forest. Final tally, 2 hours. 3 blisters on my palms, one the size of a cherry. Arms that shake so badly I can barely bring them to my face when I try to wash off the sweat. A raw, red cut in the flesh of one hand, where the metal handle of one of the buckets has worn away the skin. At dinner, Tak gives me the biggest serving of rice and beans, and although I can barely hold my fork because of the blisters, and Squirrel accidentally charred the rice so that it's brown and crispy on its underside, I think it is the best meal I have had since I came to the wilds. I'm so tired after dinner I fall asleep with my clothes on, almost as soon as my head hits the pillow, and so I forget to ask God, in my prayers, to keep me from waking up. It's not until the following morning that I realize what day it is, September 26th. Hannah was cured yesterday. Hannah is gone. I have not cried since Alex died. Alex is alive. That becomes my mantra, the story I tell myself every day, as I emerge into the inky dawn and the mist and begin, slowly, painstakingly, to train again. If I can run all the way to the old bank, lungs exploding, thighs shaking, then Alex will be alive. First it's 40 feet, then 60, then 2 minutes straight, then 4. If I can make it to that tree, Alex will come back. Alex is standing just beyond that hill. If I can make it to the top without stopping, he'll be there. At first I trip and nearly twist my ankle about half a dozen times. I'm not used to the landscape of litter, can hardly see in the low, murky dawn light. But my eyes get better, or my feet learn the way, and after a few weeks my body gets used to the planes and angles of the ground, and the geometry of all those broken streets and buildings, and then I can run the whole length of the old main street without watching my feet. Then it's farther, and faster. Alex is alive. Just one more push, just a final sprint, and you'll see. When Hannah and I were on the track team together, we used to play little mental games like this to keep ourselves motivated. Running is a mental sport, more than anything else. You're only as good as your training, and your training is only as good as your thinking. If you make the whole 8 miles without walking, you'll get 100% on your history boards. That's the kind of thing we used to say together. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes we'd give up, laughing, at mile 7, saying, "Oops. There goes our history score." That's the thing, we didn't really care. A world without love is also a world without stakes. Alex is alive. Push, push, push. I run until my feet are swollen, until my toes bleed and blister. Raven screams at me even as she is preparing buckets of cold water for my feet, tells me to be careful, warns me about the dangers of infection. Antibiotics are not easy to come by here. The next morning I wrap my toes in cloth, stuff my feet into my shoes, and run again. If you can, just a little bit farther, just a little bit faster, you'll see, You'll see, you'll see. Alex is alive. I'm not crazy. I know he isn't, not really. As soon as my runs are done and I'm hobbling back to the church basement, it hits me like a wall, the stupidity of it all, the pointlessness. Alex is gone, and no amount of running or pushing or bleeding will bring him back. I know it. But here's the thing, when I'm running, there's always this split second when the pain is ripping through me and I can hardly breathe and all I see is color and blur, and in that split second, right as the pain crests, and becomes too much, and there's a whiteness going through me, I see something to my left, a flicker of color, auburn hair, burning, a crown of leaves, and I know then, too, that if I only turn my head he'll be there, laughing, watching me, holding out his arms. I don't ever turn my head to look, of course. But one day I will. One day I will, and he'll be back, and everything will be okay. And until then, I run. Chapter now. After the DFA meeting, I follow the crowd streaming out into the watery, early spring light. The energy is still there, pulsing through us all, but in the sunshine and the cold it feels meaner, harder-edged, an impulse to destroy. Several buses are waiting at the curb, and already the lines to board zigzag back up the stairs of the Javits Center. I've been waiting for half an hour, and have already seen 3 different rotations of buses, when I realize I've left one of my gloves inside the auditorium. I stop myself from cursing. I am packed among the cured, surrounded by them, and don't want to raise any alarms. I'm only 20 people from the front of the line now, and for a moment I consider leaving the glove. But the past 6 months have taught me too much about wanting. In the wilds it is practically a sin to waste, and it is definitely bad luck. Waste today, want tomorrow, another of Raven's favorite mantras. I slip out of line, attracting puzzled looks and frowns, and head back up the stairs to the polished glass doors. The regulator who was manning the metal detector is gone, though he has left a portable radio on, and a half-drunk cup of coffee, lid off, sitting next to it. The woman who checked my ID has also disappeared, and the folding table has been cleared of DFA leaflets. The overhead lights have been turned off, and the room feels even vaster than usual. Swinging open the auditorium doors, I am momentarily disoriented. I am staring, suddenly, at the enormous peak of a snow-capped mountain as though falling toward it from above. The picture is projected, huge, on the screen where Julian Feynman's face was enlarged earlier. But the room is otherwise dark, and the image is sharp and vivid. I can make out the dense ring of trees, like a black fir, at its base, and the sharp, blade-like peaks at its summit, crowned with lacy white caps. My breath catches a little. It's beautiful. Then the picture changes. This time I am looking at a pale, sandy beach, and a swirling blue-green ocean. I take several steps into the room, suppressing a cry. I haven't seen the ocean since leaving Portland. The picture changes again. Now the screen is full of huge trees, shooting up toward the sky, which is just visible through the canopy of thick branches. Sunlight slants at steep angles across the reddish trunks and the undergrowth of curling green ferns and flowers. I move forward again, entranced, compelled, and bump against one of the metal folding chairs. Instantly a person jumps from the front row, and a shadow silhouette floats onto the screen, obscuring a portion of the forest. Then the screen goes blank and the lights go on, and the silhouette is Julian Feynman. He is holding a remote control. "What are you doing here?" he demands. I've clearly caught him off guard. Without waiting for me to reply, he says, "The meeting's over." Beneath the aggression, I sense something else, embarrassment. And I am positive, then, that this is Julian Feynman's secret. He sits in the dark, he imagines himself into other places. He looks at beautiful pictures. I'm so surprised I can barely stammer out a reply. I lost my glove. Julian looks away from me. I see his fingers tighten on the remote control. But when his eyes slide back to mine, he has regained his composure, his politeness. Where were you sitting? He asks me. I can help you look for it. No, I burst out too loudly. I'm still in shock. The air between us still feels charged and unstable, like it did during the meeting. Something deep inside of me is aching. Those pictures, that ocean, blown up on the enormous screen, made me feel as though I could fall through space and into the forest, could lick the snow off the mountaintop like whipped cream from a spoon. I wish I could ask him to turn off the lights, to show me again. But he is Julian Feynman, and he is everything I hate, and I will not ask him for anything. I move quickly back up to where I was sitting. Julian watches me the whole time, although he doesn't move. He stands there, perfectly still, in front of the now blank screen. Only his eyes are mobile, alive. I can feel them on my neck, on my back, tangled in my hair. I find my glove easily and scoop it off the ground, holding it up for Julian's inspection. Found it, I say, deliberately avoiding his eyes. I start walking quickly to the exit. He stops me with a question. How long were you standing there? What? I turn around again to look at him. His face is now expressionless, unreadable. How long were you there? How many pictures did you see? I hesitate, wondering whether this is some kind of test. I saw the mountain, I say finally. He looks down at his feet, then meets my gaze again. Even from a distance, I am startled by the clarity of his eyes. We're looking for strongholds, he says, lifting his chin, as though expecting me to contradict him. Invalid camps. We're using all kinds of surveillance techniques. So, another fact, Julian Feynman is a liar. At the same time, it's a mark of progress that someone like Julian would even use the word. A year ago, invalids weren't even supposed to exist. We were supposed to have been exterminated during the Blitz. We were the stuff of myth, like unicorns and werewolves. That was before the incidents, before the resistance started asserting itself more forcefully and we became impossible to ignore. I force myself to smile. I hope you find them, I say. I hope you find every last one. Julian nods. As I turn around, I add, before they find you. His voice rings out sharply. What did you say? I shoot him a look over my shoulder. Before they find us, I say, and push through the doors, letting them swing shut behind me. By the time I make it back to Brooklyn, the sun has set. The apartment is cold. The shades are drawn, and a single light burns in the foyer. The sideboard just inside the hall is stacked with a slender pile of mail. No one is safe until everyone is cured, reads the writing on the first envelope, printed neatly above our address. Then, beneath it, please support the DFA. Next to the mail is a small silver tray for our identification papers. 2 IDs are lined up next to each other, Rebecca Ann Sherman and Thomas Clive Sherman, both unsmiling in their official portraits, staring straight ahead. Rebecca has coal-black hair, perfectly parted, and wide brown eyes. Thomas's hair is clipped so short it's difficult to judge what color it might be. His eyes are hooded, as though he's close to sleep. Beneath their IDs are their documents, clipped together neatly. If you were to page through the packet, you would learn all the relevant facts about Rebecca and Thomas, dates and places of birth, parents and grandparents, salaries, school grades, incidents of disobedience, evaluation, and board scores, the date and place of their wedding ceremony, all previous addresses. Of course, Rebecca and Thomas don't really exist, any more than Lena Morgan Jones exists, a thin-faced girl, also unsmiling in her official ID. My ID goes next to Rebecca's. You never know when there might be a raid, or a census. It's better if you don't have to go digging for your documents. It's best, actually, if nobody ever goes digging around here. It wasn't until I moved to New York City that I understood Raven's obsession with order in the wilds. The surfaces must look right. They must be smooth. There must never be any crumbs. That way there is never any trail to follow. The curtains are closed in the living room. This keeps the heat in and also the eyes of the neighbors, of the regulators, of passing patrols out. In Zombieland, someone is always watching. There is nothing else for people to do. They do not think. They feel no passion, no hatred, no sadness, they feel nothing but fear, and a desire for control. So they watch, and poke, and pry. At the back of the apartment is the kitchen. Hanging on the wall above the table is a photograph of Thomas Feynman, and another of Cormac T. Holmes, the scientist credited with performing the first ever successful cure. Past the stove is a little alcove pantry. It is lined with narrow shelves and absolutely packed with food. The memory of a long hunger is difficult to shake, and all of us the ones who know are secret hoarders now. We pack granola bars in our bags and stuff our pockets with sugar packets. You never know when the hunger will be back. One of the pantry's 3 walls is, in fact, a hidden door. I ease it open to reveal a set of rough wooden stairs. A light glows dimly in the basement, and I hear the staccato rhythm of voices. Raven and Tack are fighting, nothing new there, and I hear Tack, sounding pained, say, "I just don't understand why we can't be honest with each other. We're supposed to be on the same side." Raven responds sharply, "You know that's unrealistic, Tack. It's for the best. You have to trust me. You're the one who isn't trusting." His voice cuts off sharply as I shut the door behind me, a little louder than I normally would, so they'll know I'm there. I hate listening to Tack and Raven fight. I'd never heard any adults fight until I escaped to the wilds though. Over time I've grown more used to it. I've had to. It seems like they're always bickering about something. I go down the stairs. As I do, Tack turns away, passing a hand over his eyes. Raven says shortly, "You're late. The meeting ended hours ago." "What happened?" "I missed the first round of buses." Before Raven can start lecturing, I quickly add, "I left a glove and had to go back for it. I spoke to Julian Feynman." "You what?" Raven bursts out, and Tack sighs and rubs his forehead. "Only for, like, a minute. I almost tell them about the pictures and decide, at the last minute, that I won't. It's cool. Nothing happened." "It's not cool, Lena," Tack says. "What did we tell you? It's all about staying under the radar." Sometimes it feels as though Tack and Raven take their roles as Thomas and Rachel strict guardians a little bit too seriously, and I have to fight the urge to roll my eyes. "It was no big deal," I insist. "Everything's a big deal. Don't you get it?" Raven cuts him off. "She gets it. She's heard it 1,000 times. Give her a break, okay?" Tack stares at her mutely for a second, his mouth a thin white line. Raven meets his gaze steadily. "I know they're angry about other things, that it's not just me, but I feel a hot rush of guilt anyway. I'm making things worse." "You're unbelievable," Tack says. "I don't think he means for me to hear." Then he brushes past me and pounds up the stairs. Where are you going? Raven demands, and for a moment something flares in her eyes, some need, or fear. But it's gone before I can identify it. Out, Tak says without stopping. There's no air down here. I can hardly breathe. Then he's pushing into the pantry and the door closes at the top of the stairwell, and Raven and I are left alone. For a second we stand in silence. Then Raven barks a laugh. Don't mind him, she says. You know Tak. Yeah, I say, feeling awkward. The fight has soured the air, Tak was right. The basement feels heavy, clotted. Normally it's my favorite place in the house, this secret space Tak and Raven's, too. It's the only place where we can shed the false skins, fake names, fake pasts. At least this room feels inhabited. The upstairs looks like a normal house, and smells like a normal house, and is full of normal house things, but it's off somehow, as though it were tipped just a few inches on its foundations. In contrast to the rest of the apartment, the basement is a wreck. Raven can't clean and straighten as fast as Tak can accumulate and unravel. Books, real books, banned books, old books are piled everywhere. Tak collects them. No, more than that. He hoards them, the way the rest of us hoard food. I tried to read a few of them, just to find out what it was like before the cure, and before all the fences, but it made my chest ache to imagine it, all that freedom, all that feeling in life. It's better, much better, not to think about it too much. Alex loved books. He was the one who first introduced me to poetry. That's another reason I can't read anymore. Raven sighs and starts shuffling some papers piled haphazardly on a rickety wooden table in the center of the room. It's this goddamn rally, she says. It's got everybody all twitchy. What's the problem? I ask. She waves away the question. Same as always. Rumors about a riot. The underground is saying the scavengers will show, try to pull something major. But nothing's confirmed. Raven's voice takes on a hard edge. I don't even like to say the word scavengers. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth, of things rotting, of ash. All of us the invalids, the resistance hate the scavengers. They give us a bad name. Everyone agrees that they'll ruin, have already ruined, so much of what we are working to achieve. The scavengers are invalids, like us, but they don't stand for anything. We want to take down the walls and get rid of the cure. The scavengers want to take down everything. Burn everything to dust, steal and slaughter and set the world to flame. I've only run into a group of scavengers once, but I still have nightmares about them. They won't be able to pull it off, I say, trying to sound confident. They're not organized. Raven shrugs. I hope not. She stacks books on top of one another, making sure their corners are aligned. For a second I feel a rush of sadness for her, standing in the middle of so much mess, stacking books as though it means something, as though it will help. Is there anything I can do? Don't worry about it. Raven gives me a tight smile. That's my job, okay. That is another one of Raven's catchphrases. Like her insistence that the past is dead, it has become a kind of mantra. I worry, you do what I say. We all need mantras, I guess, stories we tell ourselves to keep us going. Okay. For a moment we stand there. It's strange. In some ways Raven does feel like family, she's the closest thing I have to it, anyway, but at other times it occurs to me I don't really know her any better than I did in August, when she first found me. I still don't know much about the person she was before coming to the wilds. She has closed that part of herself down, folded it back to some deep, unreachable place. Go on, she says, jerking her head toward the stairs. It's late. You should eat something. As I head up the stairs I brush my fingers, once, against the metal license plate we've tacked onto the wall. We found it in the wilds, half buried in the mud and slush. During the relocation, we were all close to dead at that point, exhausted and starving, sick and freezing. Bram was the one who spotted it, and as he lifted it out of the ground, the sun had burst through the cloud cover, and the metal had flared a sudden white, almost blinding me so I could barely read the words printed underneath the number. Old words, words that nearly brought me to my knees. Live free or die. 4 words. 13 letters. Ridges, bumps, swirls under my fingertips. Another story. We cling tightly to it, and our belief turns it to truth. Chapter then. It gets colder by the day. In the morning, the grass is coated in frost. The air stings my lungs when I run. The edges of the river are coated thinly with ice, which breaks apart around our ankles as we wade into the water with our buckets. The sun is sluggish, collapsing behind the horizon earlier and earlier, after a weak, watery swim across the sky. I am growing stronger. I am a stone being excavated by the slow passage of water, I am wood charred by a fire. My muscles are ropes, my legs are wooden. My palms are calloused, the bottoms of my feet, too, are as thick and blunt as stone. I never miss a run. I volunteer to cart the water every day, even though we're supposed to rotate. Soon I can carry 2 buckets by myself the whole way back to camp without once pausing or stopping. Alex passes next to me, weaving in and out of the shadows, threading between the crimson and yellow trees. In the summer he was fuller, I could see his eyes, his hair, a flash of his elbow. As the leaves begin to whirl to the ground and more trees are denuded, he is a stark black shadow, flickering in my peripheral vision. I am learning, too. Hunter shows me how the messages are passed to us, how the sympathizers on the other side alert us to an arriving shipment. Come on, he says to me one morning after breakfast. Blue and I are in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes. Blue has never quite opened up to me. She answers my questions with simple nods or shakes of her head. Her smallness, her shyness, the thinness of her bones, when I'm with Blue, I can't help but think of Grace. That's why I avoid her as much as possible. Come on, where? I ask Hunter. He grins. You a good climber? The question takes me by surprise. I'm okay, I say, and have a sudden memory of scaling the border fence with Alex. I replace it quickly with another image. I am climbing into the leafy branches of one of the big maples in Deering Oaks Park. Hannah's blonde hair flashes underneath the layers of green. She is circling the trunk, laughing, calling up for me to go higher. But then I must take her out of the memory. I've learned to do that here, in the wilds. In my head I trim her away, her voice, the flashing crown of her head. And leave only the sense of height, the swaying leaves, the green grass below me. It's time to show you the nests, then, Hunter says. I'm not looking forward to being outside. It was bitterly cold last night. The wind shrieked through the trees, tore down the stairs, probed all the cracks and crevices of the burrow with long, icy fingers. I came in half frozen from my run this morning, my fingers numb and blunt and useless. But I'm curious about the nests. I've heard the other homesteaders use the word and I'm anxious to get away from Blue. Can you finish up here? I ask Blue, and she nods, chewing on her lower lip. Grace used to do that too, when she was nervous. I feel a sharp pang of guilt. It's not Blue's fault that she reminds me of Grace. It's not Blue's fault I left Grace behind. Thanks, Blue, I say, and lay one hand on her shoulder. I can feel her trembling slightly beneath my fingers. The cold is a wall, a physical force. I've managed to find an old windbreaker in the collection of clothes, but it's far too big and doesn't stop the wind from biting at my neck and fingers, slipping beneath the collar and freezing my heart in my chest. The ground is frozen and the frost-coated grass crunches under our feet. We walk quickly, to stay warm, our breath comes in clouds. How come you don't like Blue? Hunter asks abruptly. I do, I say quickly. I mean, she doesn't really talk to me, but, I trail off. Is it that obvious? He laughs. So you don't like her? She just reminds me of someone, that's all, I say shortly, and Hunter turns serious. From before? He asks. I nod, and he reaches out and touches me once, lightly, on the elbow, to show me he understands. Hunter and I talk about everything except before. Of all the homesteaders, he is the one I feel closest to. We sit next to each other at dinner, and sometimes we stay up afterward, talking until the room is smudgy with smoke from the dying fire. Hunter makes me laugh, even though for a long time I thought I would never laugh again. It wasn't easy to feel comfortable around him. It was hard to shake all the lessons I learned on the other side, in Portland, warnings drilled into me by everyone I admired and trusted. The disease, they taught me, grew in the space between men and women, boys and girls. It was passed between them in looks and smiles and touches, and would take root inside of them like mold that rots a tree from the inside out. Then I found out that Hunter was an unnatural, a thing I'd always been taught to revile. Now Hunter is Hunter, and a friend, and nothing more. We head north, away from the homestead. It's early, and the woods are quiet except for the crunch of our shoes on the thick layering of dead leaves. It hasn't rained in several weeks. The woods are starved for water. It's funny how I've learned to feel the woods, to understand them, their moods and tantrums, their explosions of joy and color. It's so different from the parks and the carefully tended natural spaces in Portland. Those places were like animals at the zoo, caged in and also flattened, somehow. The wilds are alive and temperamental and beautiful. Despite the hardships here, I am growing to love them. Almost there, Hunter says. He nods to our left. Beyond the denuded branches I can see a crown of razor wire, looped at the top of a fence, and I feel a flash of fear, hot and sudden. I didn't realize we'd come so close to the border. We must be skirting the edge of Rochester. Don't worry. Hunter reaches out and squeezes my shoulder. This side of the border isn't patrolled. I've been in the wilds for a month and a half now, and in that time I've almost forgotten about the fences. It's amazing how close I have been, all this time, to my old life. And yet the distance that divides me from it is vast. We veer away from the fence again. Soon we come to an area of enormous trees, bare branches grey and gnarled like arthritic fingers. It may have been years since they've bloomed at all, the trees seem to have been dead a long time. But when I say so to Hunter, he just laughs and shakes his head. Not dead. He raps one with his knuckles as we pass. Just biding their time. Storing up energy. They tuck all their life away deep inside, for winter. When it gets warm, they'll bloom again. You'll see. I'm comforted by his words. ULLC means we're coming back here. It means you're one of us now. I run my fingers along a tree, feel the bark flake dryly under my fingertips. It's impossible to imagine anything alive under all that hardness, anything flowing or moving. Hunter stops so abruptly I almost run into him. Here we are, he says, grinning. The nests. He points upward. High in the branches of the trees are massive tangles of birds' nests, curls and spray, bits of moss and hanging creepers, all woven together so that it looks as though the trees are crowned with hair. But even stranger, the branches are painted. Drips of green and yellow paint stain the bark, delicate forked footprints, also colored, dance along the nests. What? I see a large bird, about the size of a crow, wing toward a nest directly above our heads. It pauses, watching us. Everything about the bird is black, except for its feet, which are painted a vivid shade of bright green. It is carrying something in its mouth. After a moment it flaps into the nest, and a chorus of chirping begins. Green, Hunter says, looking satisfied. That's a good sign. Supplies will be coming today. I don't understand. I'm pacing underneath the network of nests. There must be hundreds of them. Some of the nests are actually strung up between the branches of different trees, forming a dense canopy. It is even colder here, the sun barely penetrates. Come on, Hunter says. I'll show you. He hoists himself up into the nearest tree, swinging easily up the trunk, using the many branches and protrusions as hand and footholds. I follow Hunter clumsily, imitating the placement of his hands and feet. It has been a long time since I've climbed a tree, and I remember it from childhood as effortless, swinging up into the branches without thought, unconsciously finding the nooks and cricks in the tree. Now it is painful and difficult. I finally make it to one of the thicker, low-hanging branches. Hunter is straddling it, waiting for me. I crouch behind him. My legs are shaking a little, and he reaches back and loops his hands around my ankles, steadying me. The nests are full of birds, piles of sleek black feathers, and winking black eyes. They are hopping and picking among heaps of tiny brown seeds, stockpiled for the winter. Several of them, disturbed by our arrival, go shrieking and cawing toward the sky. The nests are coated with the same vivid green paint, a network of thatched claw prints as the birds flutter between nests. I still don't understand, I say. Where does the color come from? From the other side, Hunter says, and I can hear the pride in his voice. From Zombieland. In the summer, there are blueberry bushes that grow on the other side of the fence. The birds scavenge for food there. Over the years, the insiders started feeding them pellets and seeds, keeping them fat through winter. They line up different colored troughs when they need to get us messages, half seeds, half paint. The birds eat and then they fly back here, to store up seeds for later. The nests get colored, and we get our messages. Green, yellow, or red. Green if everything's fine, if we can expect a shipment. Yellow if there's a problem or delay. Don't the colors get all mixed up? I say. Hunter swivels around to look at me, eyes shining. That's the brilliant thing, he says, and tips his head back toward the nests. The birds don't like the color. It attracts predators. So they're constantly reforming the nests. It's like a blank palette every day. And even as I'm watching, the bird in the nest closest to us is selecting the green-tinged twigs, wrestling them away from the nests with her beak, pruning, snipping, cleaning, like a woman fussing over weeds in a garden. The nest is being transformed in front of my eyes, remade into something dull and brown and normal colored. It's amazing, I say. It's nature. Hunter's voice turns serious. Birds feed, then they nest. Paint them any color you want, send them halfway around the world, but they'll always find a way back. And eventually they'll show their true colors again. That's what animals do. As he speaks, I think of the raids last summer, when the regulators in their stiff uniforms stormed an illegal party, swinging baseball bats and police batons, letting loose the foaming, snapping bull mastiffs on the crowd. I think of the swinging arc of blood on a wall, the sounds of skulls cracking underneath heavy wood. Underneath their badges and their blank gazes, the Kurds are full of a hatred that's colder and also more frightening. They are detached from passion, but also from sympathy. Underneath their colors, they are animals, too. I could not have stayed there, I will never go back. I will not become one of the walking dead. It's not until we're on the ground again and headed back to the homestead that I'm struck by something else Hunter said. What does red mean? I ask. He looks at me, startled. We've been silent for a while, both lost in thought. What? Green is for supplies, yellow when there's been a delay. So what does red mean? For a moment I see fear flashing in Hunter's eyes, and suddenly I am cold again. Red means run, he says. The relocation will soon begin in earnest. We will move everyone, the whole homestead, south. It is an enormous undertaking, and Raven and Tack spend hours planning, debating, arguing. It is not the first time they have orchestrated a relocation, but I gather that the moves have been hard and dangerous, and Raven considers them both failures. But spending the winters up north has been even harder, and proved even more fatal, and so we will go. Raven insists that this time there will be no mortalities. Everyone who leaves the homestead will arrive safely at our destination. You can't guarantee that, I hear Tack say to her one night. It's late, and I've been startled awake by the sounds of retching from the sick room. It's Lou's turn. I've slipped out of bed and started toward the kitchen for water when I realize Tack and Raven are still there, illuminated by the low, smoldering glow from the fire. The kitchen is murky, filled with wood smoke. I pause in the hallway. Everyone stays alive, Raven says stubbornly, and her voice trembles a little. Tack sighs. He sounds tired and something else, too. Gentle. Concerned. I've come to think of Tack as a dog, all bite and snarl. No softness to him at all. You can't save everybody, Ray, he says. I can try, she says. I go back to my room without the water, drawing my blankets all the way up to my chin. The air is full of shadows, shifting shapes I can't identify. There will be two main issues once we leave the homestead: food and shelter. There are other camps, other groups of invalids, farther south, but settlements are few and separated by large expanses of open land. The northern wilds are unforgiving in the fall and winter, hard and brittle and barren, full of hungry animals. Over the years, traveling invalids have mapped out a route. They have marked the trees with a system of gouges and slashes, to indicate the easiest path south. Next week, groups of homesteaders scouts will leave on preliminary expeditions. 6 will trek to our next big camp, which is 80 miles south, carting food and supplies in backpacks strapped to their bodies. When they reach camp, they will bury half the food in the ground, so it will not be consumed by animals, and mark the place of burial with a group of stones. 2 will return to the homestead, the other 4 will go on another 60 miles, where they will bury half of what remains. 2 of the 4 will then return to the homestead. The 5th scout will wait there while the last scout pushes a final 40 miles, equipped with the remaining portion of food. They will return to the homestead together, trapping and foraging what they can. By then we will have made all the arrangements and finished packing up. When I ask Raven why the camps get closer and closer together as they wind southward, she barely glances up from what she's doing. You'll see, she says shortly. Her hair is plaited into dozens of small braids. Blue's work and Raven has fixed golden leaves and dried red baneberries, which are poisonous, at their ends. Isn't it better to go as far as we can every day? I press. Even the third camp is 100 miles from our final destination, although as we move south we'll find other homesteads, better trapping, and people to share their food and shelter with us. Raven sighs. We'll be weak by then, she says, finally straightening up to look at me. Cold. Hungry. It will probably be snowing. The wilds suck the life out of you, I'm telling you. It's not like going on one of your little morning runs. You can't just keep pushing. I've seen. She breaks off, shaking her head, as though to dislodge a memory. We have to be very careful, she finishes. I'm so offended I can't speak for a moment. Raven called my runs little, as though they're some kind of game. But I've left bits of myself out there: skin, blood, sweat, and vomit, bits of Lena Halloway, flaking off in pieces, scattered in the dark. Raven senses she's upset me. Help me with these, will you? She asks. She's making small emergency pouches, one for every homesteader, filled with Advil, band-aids, antibacterial wipes. She piles the supplies in the center of squares of fabric, cut from old sheets, then twists them into pouches and ties them off with wire. My fingers are so fat I keep getting everything all tangled. It's not true, Raven's fingers are thin, just like the rest of her, and I know she's trying to make me feel better. But I say, yeah, sure. Raven hardly ever asks for help. When she does, you give it. The scouts will be exhausted. Even though they will be weighed down by food, it is for storing, not for eating, and they have room to carry only a tiny bit for themselves. The last scout, the one who goes all 180 miles, has to be the strongest. Without conferring or discussing it, everyone knows it will be Tak. One night, I work up the courage to approach him. He is in a rare good mood. Bram brought 4 rabbits from the traps today, and for once we have all eaten until we were completely full. After dinner, Tak sits next to the fire, rolling a cigarette. He doesn't look up as I approach. What? He asks, abrupt as ever, but his voice has none of its usual edge. I suck in a deep breath and blurt out, I want to be one of the scouts. I've been agonizing all week about what to say to Tak. I've written whole speeches in my head, but at the last second these 8 words are all that come. No, Tak says shortly. And just like that, all my worrying and planning and strategizing have come to nothing. I'm torn between disappointment and anger. I'm fast, I say. I'm strong. Not strong enough. I want to help, I press, conscious of the whine that is creeping into my voice, conscious of the fact that I sound like Blue when she is throwing one of her rare tantrums. Tak runs his tongue along the rolling paper and then twists the cigarette closed with a few expert turns of his fingers. He looks up at me then, and in that second I realize Tak hardly ever looks at me. His eyes are shrewd, appraising, filled with messages I don't understand. Later, he says, and with that, he stands and pushes his way past me and up the stairs. The morning of the rally is unseasonably warm. What little snow has remained on the ground and the roofs runs in rivulets through the gutters, and drips from street lamps and tree branches. It is dazzlingly sunny. The puddles in the street look like polished metal, perfectly reflective. Raven and Tak are joining me at the demonstration, although they've informed me that they won't actually stay with me. My job is to keep close to the stage. I'm to watch Julian before he heads uptown to Columbia Memorial, where he will be cured. Don't take your eyes off him, no matter what, Raven has instructed me. No matter what, okay. Why? I ask, knowing my question will go unanswered. Despite the fact that I am officially part of the resistance, I know hardly anything about how it works, and what we're supposed to be doing. Because, she says, I said so. I mouth the last part along with her, keeping my back turned so she won't see. Uncharacteristically, there are long lines at the bus stops. 2 different regulators are distributing numbers to the waiting passengers, Raven, Tak, and I will be on bus 5, whenever that arrives. The city has quadrupled the quantity of buses and drivers today. 25,000 people are expected to show up at the demonstration, about 5,000 members of the DFA, and thousands of spectators and onlookers. Many of the groups that oppose the DFA, and the idea of early procedure, will also be there. This includes much of the scientific community. The procedure is just not yet safe for children, they say, and will lead to tremendous social defects, a nation of idiots and freaks. The DFA claims the opposition is overly cautious. The benefits, they say, far outweigh the risks. And if need be, we will just make our prisons larger, and stick the damaged ones there, out of sight. Move up, move up. The regulator at the front of the line directs us onto the bus. We shuffle forward, showing our identity cards and swiping them, again, as we board, and I am reminded of a bunch of herd animals, heads down, trundling ahead. Raven and Tak have not been speaking, they must be fighting again. I can sense it between them, a tight electricity, and it's not helping my anxiety. Raven finds an empty 2-seater in the back, but Tak, surprisingly, slides in next to me. What are you doing? Raven demands, leaning forward. She has to be careful to keep her voice down. Kurds don't really fight. That is one of the benefits of the procedure. I want to make sure Lena's okay, Tak mutters back. He reaches out and grabs my hand, a quick pulse. A woman seated across the aisle looks at us curiously. Are you all right? I'm fine, I say, but my voice sounds strangled. I wasn't nervous at all earlier in the morning. Tak and Raven have made me jumpy. They're obviously worried about something, and I think I know what it is. They must believe the rumors of the scavengers are true. They must believe the scavengers are going to stage an upset, try to disturb the demonstration in some way. Even crossing the Brooklyn Bridge doesn't have its usual calming effect. The bridge is, for the first time ever, clogged with traffic, private cars, and buses transporting people to the demonstration. As we approach Times Square, my anxiety increases. I've never seen so many people in my life. We have to get out at 34th Street because buses cannot progress any farther. The streets are swarming with people, a massive blur of faces, a river of colors. There are regulators, 2 volunteer and official, wearing spotless uniforms, then there are members of the armed guard, standing stiffly in rows, staring fixedly straight ahead, like toy soldiers lined up, about to march. Except these soldiers, these real ones, carry enormous guns, barrels gleaming in the sunlight. As soon as I descend into the crowd I'm pushed and jostled from all sides, and even though Raven and Tak are behind me, I manage to lose sight of them a few times as people flow between us. Now I see why they've given me my instructions early. There's no way I'll be able to keep sight of them. It is shatteringly loud. The regulators are blowing their whistles, directing foot traffic, and in the distance I can hear drumbeats and chanting. The demonstration doesn't officially start for another 2 hours, but even now I think I can make out the rhythm of the DFA's chant, in numbers there is safety and for nothing let us want. We move north slowly, penned in on all sides, in the endless, deep chasms between the buildings. People have gathered on some of the balconies to watch. I see hundreds and hundreds of waving white banners, signs of support for the DFA, and just a few emerald-colored ones, signs of opposition. Lena. I turn around. Tak shoves his way through the mass of people, presses an umbrella into my hand. It's supposed to rain later. The sky is a perfect pale blue and streaked with the thinnest clouds, like bare white tendrils of hair. I don't think, I start to say, but he interrupts me. Just take it, he says. Trust me. Thanks. I try to sound grateful. It's rare for Tak to be this thoughtful. He hesitates, chewing on the corner of his lip. I've seen him do that when he's working on a puzzle at the apartment and can't quite get all the pieces aligned. I think he's about to say something else, give me advice, but at the last second he just says, I need to catch up with Rebecca. He stutters, just barely, over Raven's official name. Okay. We've already lost sight of her. I go to wrestle the umbrella into my backpack, getting dirty looks from the people around me, since there's barely room to breathe, much less maneuver the bag from my back, when it suddenly occurs to me that we haven't made a plan for after the demonstration. I don't know where I'm supposed to meet Raven and Tak. Hey, I look up, but Tak has already gone. All the faces around me are unfamiliar, I'm entirely surrounded by strangers. I turn a full circle and feel a sharp jab in the ribs. A regulator has reached out and is prodding me forward with his nightstick. You're holding everybody up, he says flatly. Move it. My chest is full of butterflies. I tell myself to breathe. There's nothing to worry about. It's just like going to a DFA meeting, but bigger. At 38th Street we pass the barricades, where we have to wait in line and get patted down and searched by police officers carrying wands. They check our necks, too. The uncureds will be in their own special segregated section of the demonstration and scan our IDs, though fortunately, they don't call everything into SVS, the secure validation system. Even so, it takes me an hour to make it through. Beyond the security barricades, volunteers are distributing antibacterial wipes, small white packages printed with the DFA's logo. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Security is in the details. Happiness is in the method. I allow a silver-haired woman to press a package into my hand. And then, finally, I've arrived. The drums are furiously loud here, and the chanting a rolling constant, like the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Once I saw a photo of Times Square, before the cure, before all the borders were closed off. Tak found it near Salvage, a homestead in New Jersey, just across the river from New York. We took refuge there while we were waiting for our forged papers to arrive. One day Tak found a whole photo album, perfectly intact, buried under a pile of limestone and charred timber. In the evenings, I would flip through it and pretend that these photographs, this life of friends and boyfriends and squinting, laughing sunshine shots, were mine. Times Square looks very different now than it did then. As I move forward in the crowd, my breath catches in my throat. A towering raised platform, a dais, has been built at one end of the enormous open plaza, underneath a billboard larger than any I have seen in my life. It is plastered all over with signs for the DFA, red and white squares, fluttering lightly in the wind. The Unified Church of Religion and Science has colonized one billboard and marked it huge with its primary symbol, a giant hand cupping a molecule of hydrogen. The other signs, and there are dozens of them, gigantic, bleached white walls, are all faded to illegibility, so it's impossible to tell what they once advertised. On one of them I think I can make out the ghostly imprint of a smile. And of course, All the lights are dead. The photograph I saw of Times Square was taken at night, but it could have been high noon. I've never seen so many lights in my life, could never even have imagined them. Lights blazing, glittering, lit up in crazy colors that made me think of those spots that float across your vision after you've accidentally looked directly at the sun. The light bulbs are still here, but they're dark. On many of them, pigeons are perching, roosting between the blacked-out bulbs. New York and its sister cities have mandatory controls on electricity, just like Portland did, and although there are a greater number of cars and buses, the blackouts are stricter and more frequent. There are just too many people, and not enough juice for all of them. The dais is wired with microphones and equipped with chairs. Behind it is an enormous video screen, like the kind the DFA uses at its meetings. Uniformed men are making last-minute adjustments to the setup. That's where Julian will be. Somehow, I'll have to get closer. I start to push my way slowly, painstakingly, through the crowd. I have to fight an elbow and say, "Excuse me," every time I try to squeeze by someone. Even being 5'2" isn't helping. There simply isn't enough space between bodies, there are no cracks to slip through. That's when I start to panic again. If the scavengers do come, or if anything goes wrong, there will be no place to run. We'll be caught here like animals in a pen. People will trample one another trying to get out. A stampede. But the scavengers won't come. They wouldn't dare. It's too dangerous. There are too many police, too many regulators, too many guns. I squeeze my way past a series of bleachers, all roped off, where members of the DFA Youth Guard are sitting, girls and boys on separate bleachers, of course, all of them careful not to look at one another. At last I make it to the foot of the dais. The platform must be 10 or 12 feet in the air. A series of steep wooden steps gives the speakers access from the ground. At the foot of the stairs, a group of people has gathered. I make out Thomas and Julian Feynman behind a blur of bodyguards and police officers. Julian and his father are dressed identically. Julian's hair is slicked back, and curls just behind his ears. He's shifting from foot to foot, obviously trying to conceal his nervousness. I wonder what's so important about him. Why Tak and Raven told me to keep an eye on him. He has become symbolic of the DFA, of course sacrifice in the name of public safety, but I wonder whether he presents some kind of additional danger. I think back to what he said at the rally. I was 9 when I was told I was dying. I wonder what it feels like to die slowly. I wonder what it feels like to die quickly. I squeeze my nails into my palms, to keep the memories back. The drumming is coming from behind the dais, a part of the square that's blocked from view. There must be a marching band there. The chanting swells, and now everyone is joining in, the whole crowd unconsciously swaying along to the rhythm. Distantly, I make out some other rhythm, a disjointed staccato. DFA is dangerous for all. The cure should protect, not harm. The dissenters. They must be sequestered somewhere else, far away from the dais. Louder, louder, louder. The DFA's chants soon drown out all other sound. I join in, let my body find the rhythm, feel the hum of all those thousands of people buzz up through my feet and into my chest. And even though I don't believe in any of it, the words, the cause, the people around me, it amazes me, still, the surge I get from being in a crowd, the electricity, the sense of power. Dangerous. Just as the chanting reaches a crescendo, Thomas Feynman breaks away from the bodyguards and takes the steps up to the top of the dais, 2 at a time. The rhythm breaks apart into waves of shouting and clapping. White banners and flags appear from everywhere, unfurling, fluttering in the wind. Some of them are DFA issue. Other people have simply cut up long strips of cloth. Times Square is full of slender white tentacles. Thank you, Thomas Feynman says into the microphone. His voice booms out over all of us, then a sharp screeching sound as the feed lets out a whine. Feynman winces, cups his hand over the microphone, and leans back to mutter instructions to someone. The angle of his neck shows off his procedural mark perfectly. The three-pronged scar is amplified by the video screen. I turn my eyes to Julian. He is standing with his arms crossed, watching his father, behind the wall of bodyguards. He must be cold, he's only wearing a suit jacket. Thank you, Thomas Feynman tries again, and, when no feed kicks back, adds, much better. My friends. That's when it happens. Pop. 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 3 miniature explosions, like the firecrackers we used to set off at Eastern Prom on the 4th of July. One scream, high and desperate. And then, everything is noise. Figures in black appear from nowhere, from everywhere. They're climbing up out of the sewers, materializing from the ground, taking shape behind the foul-smelling steam. They swarm down the sides of the buildings like spiders, rappelling on long black ropes. They're scything through the crowd with glittering, sharp blades, grabbing purses and ripping necklaces from around people's necks, slicing rings from their fingers. Thwack! Thwack! Scavengers! My insides turn to liquid. My breath stops in my throat. People are pushing and shoving, desperately trying to find a way out. The scavengers have us surrounded. Down, down, down. Now the air is filled with gunshots. The police have opened fire. One scavenger has made it halfway down a building toward the ground. A bullet explodes in his back and he jerks once, quickly, and then hangs limp from the end of his rope, swaying lightly in the wind. Somehow one of the DFA banners has become entangled in his equipment. I see the stain of blood spreading slowly across the white fabric. I am in a nightmare. I am in the past. This isn't happening. Someone shoves me from behind and I go sprawling to the pavement. The bite of the concrete snaps me into awareness. People are running, stampeding, and I quickly roll out of the way of a pair of heavy boots. I have to get back on my feet. I try to stand and get knocked down again. This time the air goes out of me, and I feel someone's weight on the middle of my back. And suddenly the fear turns me sharp and focused. I need to get up. One of the police barricades has already been broken, and a piece of splintered wood is lying in front of me. I grab it and jab behind me, into the crushing weight of people, of panic, and feel the wood connecting with legs, with muscle and skin. For a brief second I feel the weight shift, a slight release. I jump to my feet and sprint toward the dais. Julian is gone. I'm supposed to be watching Julian. No matter what happens. Piercing screams. The smell of fire. Then I spot him off to my left. He is being hustled toward one of the old subway entrances, which is, like all the other entrances, covered with plywood. But as he approaches, one of the bodyguards steps forward and pushes the plywood inward. Not a barrier. A door. Then they are gone, and the sheet of wood swings closed again. More gunshots. A massive surge in the screaming. A scavenger has been shot just as he was beginning his descent. He is knocked clear off the balcony and tumbles down into the crowd below. The people are a wave, heads, arms, contorted faces. I run toward the subway entrance where Julian disappeared. Above it I can see an old series of letters and numbers, faded bare outlines, N, R, Q, 1, 2, 3, 7 And in the middle of all that panic and screaming, there is something comforting about it, an old world code, a sign from another life. I wonder whether the old world could have possibly been worse than this, that time of dazzling lights and sizzling electricity and people who loved in the open, whether they also screamed and trampled one another to death and turned their guns on their neighbors. Then the air is knocked out of me again and I'm thrown backward. I land on my left elbow, hear it crack. Pain splinters through me. A scavenger looms over me. Impossible to say whether it's a man or a woman. The scavenger is dressed all in black and has a ski mask pulled low, covering the neck. "Give me the bag," the scavenger growls. But the voice doesn't fool me. It's a girl. She's trying to make her voice sound lower, but you can hear the melody running underneath it. For some reason, this makes me even angrier. "How dare you!" I feel like spitting at her. "You've screwed everything for everyone." But I sit up, inching the backpack off my shoulders, feeling little explosions of pain radiating all the way from my elbow to my shoulder. "Come on, come on. Hurry up." She's dancing from foot to foot, and as she does she fingers the long, sharp knife she has looped through her belt. I mentally weigh all the things I have in the bag: a tin water bottle, empty. Tax umbrella. 2 granola bars. Keys. A hardcover edition of the Book of Shhh. Tack insisted I bring it, and now I'm glad I did. It's nearly 600 pages. Should be heavy enough. I take the shoulder straps in my right hand, tightening my grip. I said move. The scavenger, impatient, bends down to grab the bag, and as she does, I swing upward with all my strength, moving through the pain. The bag catches her in the side of the head with enough momentum to knock her off balance. She tumbles to one side, landing hard on the ground. I launch to my feet. She grabs for my ankles, and I kick her hard, twice, in the ribs. The priests and the scientists are right about one thing: at our heart, at our base, we are no better than animals. The scavenger moans, doubling up, and I jump over her, dodging all the police barricades, which are lying in a tumbled, broken ruin. The screaming is still a crest of sound around me. It has turned into one tremendous wail, like a gigantic, amplified siren. I make it to the old subway entrance. For just a second I hesitate with my hand on the wooden plank. Its texture is comforting, weather-beaten, warmed by the sun, a bit of normalcy in the middle of all this madness. Another rifle shot. I hear a body thud to the ground behind me. More screaming. I lean forward and push. The door swings open a few feet, revealing murky darkness and a pungent, musty smell. I don't look back. I push the door shut again and stand for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness, listening for the sound of voices or footsteps. Nothing. The smell is sharper in here. It is the smell of old death, animal bones and rotting things. I bring my jacket cuff to my nose and inhale. There's a steady dripping off to my left. Other than that, it's quiet. There are stairs in front of me, covered in bits of crumpled newspaper, mashed up styrofoam cups, cigarette butts, all dully illuminated by an electric lantern, like the kind we used in the wilds. Someone must have planted it here earlier. I move toward the stairs, on high alert. Julian's bodyguards might have heard me shoving open the door. They might be lying in wait, ready to jump me. Mentally I curse the metal detectors and all the body scans. I would give anything to have a knife, a screwdriver, something. Then I remember my keys. I once again ease my backpack off my shoulders. When I bend my elbow, the pain makes me suck in my breath. I'm thankful I landed on my left arm with my right arm immobilized. I'd be pretty much useless. I find my keys at the bottom of my bag, moving agonizingly slowly so I don't make too much noise. I thread the keys through my fingers, like Tak showed me how to do. It's not much of a weapon, but it's better than nothing. Then I go down the stairs, scanning the shadows for anything mobile, any sudden shapes rising through the darkness. Nothing. Everything is perfectly still, and very quiet. At the bottom of the stairs, there is a dingy glass booth, still smudgy with fingerprints. Beyond it, rusted turnstiles line the tunnel, a dozen of them, like miniature windmills that have been stilled. I ease myself over one of them and land softly on the other side. From here, various tunnels branch out into the darkness, each marked with different signs, more letters, and numbers. Julian might have gone down any one of them. And all of them are swallowed in shadow. The lantern doesn't penetrate this far. I consider going back to retrieve it, but that would only give me away. Again, I stop and listen. At first there is nothing. Then, I think I hear a muffled thud from the tunnel on my left. As soon as I start toward the sound, however, there is silence once again. Now I'm sure I only imagined the noise, and I hesitate, frustrated, unsure about what to do next. I've failed in my mission, that's obvious, my first real mission of the movement. At the same time, Raven and Tak can't blame me for losing Julian when the scavengers attacked. I couldn't have predicted or prepared for that chaos. No one could have. I figure my best bet is to wait down here for a few hours, at least until the police have restored order, which I have no doubt they will. If necessary, I'll camp out for the night. Tomorrow I'll deal with getting back to Brooklyn. Suddenly, a darting shadow from my left. I whirl around, fist extended, and connect with nothing but air. A giant rat scurries in front of me, a bare inch from my sneaker. I exhale, watching the rat darting off down another tunnel, its long tail dragging in the filth. I've always hated rats. That's when I hear it, distinct and unmistakable, two thuds, and a low groan, a voice moaning out. Please, Julian's voice. My body goes prickly all over. Now the fear draws my insides hard and taut. The voice came from somewhere farther down the tunnel. I ease back against one wall, pressing myself flat, feeling moss and slick tile under my fingers as I move forward slowly, careful not to make any noise when I step, careful not to breathe too loudly. After every few paces I stop and listen, hoping for another sound, hoping Julian will say something again. But the only thing I hear is a steady drip, drip, drip. There must be a pipe leaking somewhere. Then I see it. The man is strung from a grate in the ceiling, a belt looped tightly around his bulging neck. Above him, water condenses on a metal pipe, dripping onto the tunnel floor. Drip, drip, drip. It's so dark I can't make out the man's face. The grate permits only a trickle of grey light from above. But I recognize him from the heaviness of his shoulders as one of Julian's bodyguards. At his feet, another bodyguard is lying curled up in the fetal position. There is a long-handled blade protruding from his back. I stumble backward, forgetting to be quiet. Then I hear Julian's voice again, fainter, please, I'm terrified. I don't know which direction the voice is coming from, can't think of anything but getting out, out, out. I'd rather face the scavengers in the open than trapped here, like a rat, in the dark. I will not die underground. I run blindly, keeping my arms in front of me, collide first with a wall before groping my way into the center of the tunnel. Panic has made me clumsy. Drip, drip, drip. Please. Please get me out of here. My heart will explode, I can't take a breath. Two black shapes unfold all at once from either side of me, and in my terror they look like enormous dark birds, reaching out their wings to enfold me. Not so fast, one of them says. He grabs my wrist. The keys are knocked from my hand. Then searing pain, a flash of white. I sink into the dark. Chapter then. Miyako, who should have been one of the scouts, is instead the last one to enter the sick room. She'll be back on her feet tomorrow, Raven says. You'll see. She's as solid as a rock. But the next day, her cough is so bad we can hear it reverberating through the walls. Her breathing sounds thick and watery. She sweats through her blankets even as she cries that she is cold, cold, freezing cold. She begins coughing up blood. When it's my turn to look after her, I can see it caked in the corners of her mouth. I dab at it with a washcloth, but she is still strong enough to fight me off. The fever makes her see shapes and shadows in the air. She swats at them, muttering. She can no longer stand, even when Raven and I try to lift her together. She cries out in pain, and eventually we give up. Instead we change the sheets when Miyako pisses them. I think we should burn them, but Raven insists we can't. I see her that night, furiously scrubbing them in the basin, while steam rises from the scalding water. Her forearms are the shiny red of raw meat. And then one night I wake up and the silence is perfect, a cool, dark pool. For 1 second, still emerging from the fog of my dreams, I think that Miyako must have gotten better. Tomorrow she will be squatting in the kitchen, tending the fire. Tomorrow we will make rounds together, and I will watch her braiding traps with her long, slender fingers. When she catches me staring, she will smile. But it is too quiet. I get up, a knot of dread tightening inside my chest. The floor is freezing. Raven is sitting at the foot of Miyako's bed, staring at nothing. Her hair is loose, and the flickering shadows from the candle next to her make her eyes look like two hollow pits. Miyako's eyes are closed, and I can tell right away she is dead. The desire to laugh hysterical and inappropriate wells in my throat. To quash it, I say, is she? Yes, Raven says shortly. When? I'm not sure. I fell asleep for a while. She passes a hand over her eyes. When I woke up, she wasn't breathing. My body flashes completely hot and then completely cold. I don't know what to say, so I just stand there for a while, trying not to look at Miyako's body, a statue, a shadow, her face thinned by sickness, whittled down to bone. All I can think about are her hands, which only a few days ago moved so expertly against the kitchen table as she beat out a soft rhythm so that Sarah could sing. They were a blur, like hummingbird wings full of life. I feel like something has caught in the back of my throat. I'm sorry. Raven doesn't say anything for a minute. Then, I shouldn't have made her carry water. She said she wasn't feeling well. I should have let her rest. You can't blame yourself, I say quickly. Why not? Raven looks up at me then. In that moment she looks very young. Defiant, stubborn, the way that my cousin Jenny used to look when Aunt Carol told her it was time for homework. I have to remind myself that Raven is young, 21, only a few years older than me. The wilds will age you. I wonder how long I'll last out here. Because it's not your fault. The fact that I can't see her eyes makes me nervous. You can't feel bad. Raven stands up then, cupping the candle in one hand. We're on the other side of the fence now, Lena, she says, tiredly, as she passes. Don't you get it? You can't tell me what to feel. The next day it snows. At breakfast, Sarah cries silently while spooning up oatmeal. She was close to Miyako. The scouts left the homestead 5 days ago. Tack, hunter, roach, buck, lu, and squirrel and have taken the shovel with them, for burying supplies. We collect pieces of metal and wood, whatever will serve us for digging instead. The snow is light, thankfully, by mid-morning, a bare half inches on the ground. But it's very cold, and the ground is frozen solid. After digging and hacking for a half hour, we've only made the barest indentation in the earth, and Raven, Bram, and I are sweating. Sarah, Blue, and a few others are huddled a few feet away from us, shivering. This isn't working, Raven pants out. She throws down a twisted piece of metal she has been using as a shovel, sends it skittering across the ground with a kick. Then she turns and starts stalking back toward the burrow. We'll have to burn her. Burn her. The words explode out of me before I can stop them. We can't burn her. That's Raven whirls around, eyes blazing. Yet? Well, what do you want to do? Hey? You want to leave her in the sick room. Normally I back down when Raven raises her voice, but this time I hold my ground. She deserves a burial, I say, wishing my voice wouldn't shake. Raven covers the ground between us in 2 long strides. It's a waste of our energy, she hisses, and then I can tell how full of fury and desperation she is. I remember what I heard her tell Tack, everyone stays alive. We don't have any to spare. She turns her back to me again and announces loudly, so the others can hear, we have to burn her. We wrap her body in the sheets Raven scrubbed clean. Maybe all along she knew they would be used for this purpose. I keep thinking I'm going to be sick. Lena, Raven barks at me sharply. Take her feet. I do. Her body is heavier than seems possible. In death, she has become a weight of iron. I'm furious with Raven, so furious I could spit. This is what we are reduced to here. This is what we have become in the wilds, we starve, we die, we wrap our friends in old and tattered sheets, we burn them in the open. I know it's not Raven's fault, it's the people on the other side of the fence, it's them, the zombies, my former people, but the anger refuses to dissolve. It burns a hole in my throat. A quarter mile from the homestead there is a gully where at one point a stream must have flowed. We place her there, and Raven splashes her with gasoline, just a little, as there isn't much to spare. The snow is falling harder now. At first she won't light. Blue begins to cry, loudly, and Grandma pulls her sharply away from the fire, saying, "Quiet, Blue. You're not helping." Blue turns her face into Grandma's overlarge corduroy jacket so the sound of her sobbing is muffled. Sarah is silent, white-faced, trembling. Raven douses the body with more gasoline and finally gets it lit. The air is filled right away with a choking smoke, the smell of burning hair, the noise is terrible too, a crackling that makes you think of meat falling away from bones. Raven can't even speak the whole eulogy before she starts to gag. I turn away, tears stinging my eyes from the smoke or from anger, I can't tell. Suddenly I have the wild urge to dig, to bury, to hack up the earth. I move blindly, numbly, back to the burrow. It takes me a little while to locate the cotton shorts and the old, tattered shirt I was wearing when I came to the wilds. We've been using the shirt as a dish rag. These are the only items left from before, the remnants of my old life. The others have now gathered in the kitchen. Bram is stoking the fire, coaxing it to life. Raven is boiling water in a pot, for coffee, no doubt. Sarah is shuffling a pack of water-warped and dog-eared cards. Everyone else is sitting in silence. "Hey, Lena," Sarah says as I stalk past her. I've stuffed the shorts and the t-shirt under my jacket and am keeping my arms tightly crossed over my stomach. For some reason, I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. Especially Raven. You want to play spit? Not now, I growl at her. The wilds turn us mean, too. Mean and hard, all edges. We could play something else, she says. We could play. I said no. Then I'm running up the stairs before I can see I've hurt her feelings. The air is thick, a white blur. For a moment the cold stuns me and I stand, blinking, confused. Everything is sprouting a layer of snow, a fuzzy growth. I can still smell Miyako's body burning. And I imagine that with the snow there is ash blowing over us. I fantasize that it will cover us in our sleep, seal us into the burrow, and suffocate us there, underground. There is a juniper bush at the edge of the homestead, where I start and end my runs. Underneath it the snow has not accumulated. There is a bare dusting on the ground, which I sweep away with the cuff of my jacket. Then I dig. I claw at the earth with my fingers. The anger and the grief is still throbbing behind my eyes, narrowing my vision to a tunnel. I can't even feel the cold or the pain in my hands. Dirt and blood are caking my fingernails, but I don't care. I bury those last, tattered parts of me there, under the juniper, in the snow. 2 days after we burn Miyako, the snow has still not stopped. Every day Raven scans the skies anxiously, cursing under her breath. It is time to move. Lu and Squirrel, the first of the scouts, have returned. The homestead is mostly packed up, although we are still gathering food and supplies from the river, and trying to trap and hunt what we can. But the snow makes it hard. The animals stay underground. As soon as the rest of the scouts return, we will leave. They'll be here any day now, that's what we all tell Raven, to ease her anxiety. The snow falls slowly, steadily, turning the world to white drift. I've started checking the nests for messages twice a day. The trees, encased in ice, are harder to climb. Afterward, when I come back to the burrow, my fingers throb painfully as the feeling returns to them. For weeks the supplies have been floating to us regularly, although sometimes we've found them caught upriver, in the shallows, which freeze more easily. We have to break them out with broom handles. Roach and Buck make it back to the homestead, exhausted but triumphant. The snow finally stops. Now we are just waiting on Hunter and Tack. Then one day, the nests are yellow. And again the next day, yellow. On the third day of yellow, Raven pulls me aside. I'm worried, she says. Something must be wrong on the inside. Maybe they're patrolling again, I say. Maybe they've turned on the fence. She bites her lip, shakes her head. Whatever it is, it must be major. Everyone knows it's time for us to move. We need all the supplies we can get. I'm sure it's temporary, I say. I'm sure tomorrow we'll get a shipment. Raven shakes her head again. We can't afford to wait much longer, she says, and her voice is strangled. I know she isn't thinking only of the supplies. She's thinking of Hunter and Tack, too. The next day, the sky is a pale blue, the sun high and amazingly warm, breaking through the trees and turning the ice to rivulets of flowing water. The snow brought silence with it, but now the woods are alive again, full of dripping and twittering and cracking. It is as though the wilds have been released from a muzzle. We are all in a good mood, everyone but Raven, who does her daily scan of the sky and only mutters. It won't last. On my way to the nests, stamping through the snow, I'm so warm I have to take off my jacket and tie it around my waist. The nests will be green today, I can sense it. They'll be green, and the supplies will come, and the scouts will return, and we'll all flow south together. The light is dazzling, bouncing off the glittering branches, filling my vision with spots of color, flashes of red and green. When I get to the nests, I untie my jacket and loop it over one of the lower branches. I've gotten good at the climb. My body finds its way up easily, and I feel a kind of joy in my chest I haven't felt for a long time. From far away I hear a vague humming, a low vibration that reminds me of crickets singing in the summertime. There is a vast world for us, a boundless space beyond and between the fences and the rules. We will travel it freely. We will be okay. I have almost reached the nests. I adjust my weight, seek better purchase for my feet, and pull myself upward, toward the final branch. Just then a shadow zooms past me, so sudden and startling I nearly slip backward. For a moment I feel the terror of free fall, the tipping, the cold air behind me, but at the last second I manage to right myself. My heart is pounding, though, and I can't shake that momentary impression of falling. And then I see that it wasn't a shadow that startled me. It was a bird. A bird struggling through stickiness, a bird coated in paint, floundering in its nest, splashing color everywhere. Red. 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 Dozens of them, black feathers coated thickly with crimson-colored paint, fluttering among the branches. Red means run. I don't know how I get down from the tree. I am slipping and sliding, all the grace and ease driven out of my limbs by the panic. Red means run. I drop the last 4 feet and land tumbling in the snow. Cold seeps through my jeans and sweater. I snatch my jacket and run, just like Hunter told me to do. Through the dazzling, melting world of ice, while blackness eats at the edges of my vision. Every step is an agony, and I feel like I'm in one of those nightmares where you're trying to escape but you can't move at all. Now the humming I heard earlier is louder, not like crickets at all. Like hornets. Like motors. My lungs are burning and my chest is aching and tears are stinging my eyes as I flounder toward the homestead. I want to scream. I want to sprout wings and fly. And for a second I think, maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe nothing bad will happen. That is when the humming turns into a roar, and above the trees I see the first plane tearing across the sky, screaming. But no. I'm the one screaming. I am screaming as I run. I am screaming when the first bomb falls, and the wilds turn to fire around me.